My mom and stepdad disowned me, left me out of the will to favor my stepbrother, and treated me like I didn't belong. But now, years later, they're begging for my help. One evening, seemingly out of nowhere, my mom called again. This time she came with news. Steve's been working on his will, she said, like she was mentioning a passing detail. He just wants to make sure everything's sorted. I didn't say anything at first, unsure where this was going. After a pause, she continued, he's decided to leave most of it to Tyler and Logan. It's just easier that way. I wanted to laugh, cry, scream, anything to release the knot building in my chest. Even in death, Steve made sure I knew where I stood, second best, an afterthought. I wanted to ask my mom why, to demand an answer, but there it was, clear, definitive, and somehow still a slap in the face. I'd never expected anything from Steve, but hearing it laid out so plainly hit harder than I thought it would. It wasn't about the money, it was about what it represented. Even after all these years, I wasn't a part of the family. I never had been. I forced myself to keep my voice steady. I understand, I said simply. My mom hesitated. You know, this doesn't change anything about how we feel about you, she added quickly, her words rushed and insincere. It's just paperwork, Ethan. It doesn't mean anything. But it did mean something. Everything, really. I didn't argue, I just let the conversation drift into safer topics until we hung up. But the damage was done. That call lingered with me for days, a reminder of where I stood in their lives. After that, I stopped picking up her calls for a while. It wasn't out of spite, I just couldn't bring myself to deal with it. Instead, I focused on what I could control, work, school, my own life. I took on extra shifts, joined a study group to keep up with classes, and kept my head down. Living on my own was tough, but it was simple. If something broke, I fixed it. If bills piled up, I worked more hours. It wasn't easy, but it was mine. And that was worth more than anything Steve could have left me in his will. Life carried on, and slowly, I started feeling like I had some stability. Then, out of nowhere, I got a letter from a law firm. At first, I thought it was some kind of mistake or scam. I didn't recognize the name on the envelope, and it wasn't like I had a lot of dealings with lawyers. I opened it, and there was a letter. The letter was straightforward. My great-aunt Megan, someone I barely remembered meeting as a kid, had passed away. She'd left me as her sole heir. I didn't even know she was still alive, let alone that I was in her will. The letter instructed me to contact the lawyer handling her estate to go over the details. At first, I didn't take it seriously. I assumed it was some sentimental heirloom, maybe, or an old photo album. I didn't call the lawyer right away. At first, I told myself I could wait. School was hectic, and my energy was stretched thin. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was scared to see what Megan had left me, because it would mean facing everything I'd been running from, the family who never really saw me, the sacrifices I made for people who didn't care. It wasn't just about the inheritance. It was about proving to myself that I could take this gift and turn it into something that mattered. A week later, I got another letter, this time marked urgent. That's when I decided to look into it. I called the lawyer's office, half expecting them to tell me it was a mistake. Instead, I was informed that Margaret had left me everything, a house, some land, and a trust fund worth millions. I almost dropped the phone. Millions. It didn't feel real. The lawyer asked if I could come to the office to sign some paperwork and discuss the details. I took the earliest appointment I could, still half convinced there had been some kind of error. When I got to the office, it was like stepping into a different world. The lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named M. Helper, walked me through everything. Megan had apparently been very wealthy. She'd invested in real estate, owned several properties, and made smart decisions with her money. She'd never had kids, and from what Miss Helper said, she'd always admired people who were independent and hardworking. She specifically mentioned you in her will, Miss Helper said, sliding a letter across the table. She wanted you to have the opportunity to build a life without the struggle she faced. The letter was short but heartfelt. Megan wrote about how she'd seen my determination from afar, and from afar, how she'd admired the way I kept pushing forward despite my circumstances. She believed I deserved a fresh start, free from the burdens of my past. I didn't know what to say. I'd gone from scraping by on a part-time job to being handed a future I couldn't have imagined. As I sat there staring at the papers in front of me, I thought about all the times I'd been told I wasn't enough, not responsible enough, not worthy enough. And yet here was someone who barely knew me, who believed in me more than my own family ever had. It was overwhelming, but it also felt like validation. Once the paperwork was done, I had access to the trust fund and ownership of Megan's house. The house was located in a quiet neighborhood, a couple of hours from where I lived. I decided to move in right away, leaving behind my cramped apartment and starting fresh. But word travels fast, especially in families. Within a week of moving, my mom called. She didn't even bother with small talk. I heard about Megan, she said, her tone sharp. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't think it mattered to you, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Well, it does matter, she shouted. Steve and I are struggling to keep up with bills, and Ethan needs new school supplies. You've got more than enough to help. I was stunned. It hadn't even been 2 minutes into the conversation, and she was already asking for money. Mom, I haven't even figured out what I'm doing with all this yet, I said. You don't need to figure anything out, she said quickly. Just help your family. It's the right thing to do. I told her I'd think about it, but I already knew my answer. I wasn't going to hand over money to people who'd ignored me for years, especially Steve and Tyler. The calls kept coming. First it was my mom pleading and guilting me about family responsibilities. Then Steve called, acting like he suddenly cared about me. He went on and on about how family sticks together and how I was in a position to give back. Even Tyler chimed in, sending me texts about how he was trying to get his life together and just needed a little help. The last push came when Steve showed up at my door unannounced. I opened it to find him standing there, all smiles, holding Ethan's hand. Ethan looked confused, like he didn't even know why he was there. "Can we talk?" Steve said, stepping inside. Before I could answer, I crossed my arms, staying by the door. "What do you want?" He launched into a speech about how hard things had been lately and how I could really make a difference for the family. "We're not asking for much," he said, smiling like he thought that would help. "Just enough to get us back on our feet." I cut him off. "You've got some nerve showing up here like this. Where was all this concern when I was living in a closet and blamed for everything?" Steve's smile disappeared. "That was a long time ago. This is about the future." "No," I said. "This is about you trying to take advantage of me. I'm not giving you anything. You need to leave." He tried to argue, but I wasn't having it. I told him to get out, and when he refused, I threatened to call the police. That finally got him moving.